Just to give everyone an idea of how this is going to work, we are live streaming this, just like our board meeting. It's also it's being recorded and it'll be on our webpage. So at any time, anybody in this room can stop and ask questions to any of us. But what we're also doing is putting a link on our webpage, so anybody watching right now can go on, put a question. Anyone that watches the recording a week from now, whenever, they can also put questions on, and then we'll do a question and answer sheet that is shared with everyone in the community so that everyone has the same information. So what are we going to focus on today? There's so many different things we could focus on here with North Muskegon Schools, but what we try to focus on with the state of the district are updates on the Board of Education strategic plan or goals, the district goals. Want to touch on student demographics, talk about a few little tweaks, or not tweaks, little changes that we're seeing, academic performance data, obviously, some updates on technology, budget update, which I know just recently in a board meeting we had that, but we're adding a little bit of kind of projecting with some of the trends that we're seeing, what is that maybe going to mean as we move into the future. We touched on a lot of the partnerships. The word potential's there, because up until a couple minutes ago there was potential. Now it's going to happen. So probably won't hit on a whole lot of that because we did that during the meeting. And they want to look a little bit to the future with some things coming up not only this summer but as we move forward from some of the things that we've learned from the pandemic. Because how can you start out any presentation nowadays without talking about COVID? So we're not going to talk about the horrible sides of the COVID. What we wanted to do is use this opportunity to say thank you. Thank you to Norse Nation, to our students, to our staff, our parents, grandmas, grandpas, uncles, aunts, and everyone else in our community that stuck with us, showed resilience, and all the while we continue to expect the high traditions and excellence that we always have had. Our goal all along was to keep our kids in classrooms with our amazing staff. We, and I'm saying that looking at our Board of Education, made decisions along the way that we knew everybody wasn't going to be just happy as heck about, right? We had people with opinions all over the place. But our decisions were based on what do we need to do as a board to keep our kids in our classrooms with our teachers. And I think we did a good job with that. Looking back, nobody was perfect, but I think we made some pretty good decisions. Some of the other things that we did along the way was we re-emphasized the need to prepare ourselves to assist our kids in their mental well-being to the best of our ability. We learned that, and it's not new information, guy made a hierarchy of needs about it a long time ago, but if kids aren't feeling safe, if they've got their mental well-being is not solid, their academics don't matter as much. And so what did we do? We have fully invested in therapeutic crisis intervention for schools. Every single one of our staff members is trained on that, and many, about 25% of them, have gone through advanced training. We are involved with Project SAFE, and we're rejuvenating our positive behavior intervention and supports. The principals, along with Mr. Allen, have been working on that. Our school improvement meetings this month, and then our professional development, some work over the summer are going to get us ready to fully rejuvenate that program with our full staff by next fall. So pretty proud of that, and working with different people around the county, I think that's something we can be really proud of. There's a link on the presentation to the board's strategic plan. My focus here is to show some commonalities between the board's goals, the district goals, and then the things that we're implementing, and you're going to see some of those common themes through this. Student achievement, student health and wellness, and fiscal responsibility. I think 3 pretty solid goals for a Board of Education. And they tie directly with our district school improvement goals, which are positive behavior support, a mental well-being, you could say, program, and then some academic focused areas. Want to touch a little bit on some student demographics. We're seeing some areas that we're getting a little bit of a change, and then we got some other demographic areas where we're pretty consistent with where we've been for quite a while now. You can see this is how the parent identifies their student race and how we're made up. About 84% of our students identify as white, with the rest coming from different minority groups. You can see those. Socioeconomic status mirrors pretty close to free and reduced lunch. Our free and reduced lunch percentage is actually a little closer to 30%, just because they use a few different things that you can also qualify for free and reduced lunch for. But that's a statistic that hasn't changed a whole lot, at least in the past 15 years, with about 25% of our students coming from economically disadvantaged families. Where do our kids come from? Not new news to the board, and not new news to a whole lot of people connected with North Muskegon Public Schools. About 60-ish% of our kids live here in town. About 40% come from somewhere else. And you can see all the different schools that make up our Norsemen. There's a little disclaimer there with Muskegon Heights. Muskegon Heights isn't really identified as by the state of Michigan anymore as a region. So we have kids that live in Muskegon Heights, but they would be depicted under Muskegon, Orchard View, or Mona Shores. So they're kind of mixed in with those numbers, and we know their address, and but this is how the state would report it. The great part there is, another thing that hasn't changed is a student might come to us from another school district, let's say as a first grader. They become a Norseman. They stay with us, and that's a trend that continues. So that's where you see they come from all over the county. Our school choice parents, I'm going to put a plug in, they're choosing us because they value education. These families are doing whatever they need to do to get their student to North Muskegon every day to learn. And about 40%, so almost every other kid you pass in the hallway is a school choice student. IEPs, or individual education plans. This is a number that is trending a little bit up, but it's not skyrocketing by any means. We were 9-point-some% about 10 years ago, and we went to 10%. Now we're 11% for students with special education students with an identified education plan. Because of this, what have we done? We've added staff to meet the needs of these students. And so as this trend of student needs has gone up, so has our staffing has matched it. Probably a trend that looks like it's probably going to continue. I don't think we're going to see any huge growth, but that's probably something that will gradually trickle up a little bit for us. This is one I want to talk a little bit more on, and there's a follow-up slide that really says the same thing, just in a little different way. Again, the Board of Education knows, and many in the community know, that we really target to have about 75 kids in a cohort by the time they leave 5th grade. That is a number that helps us have a pretty stable budget, helps us with staffing, and just seems to work. As you can see, middle school, high school, we're there. We actually kind of have this bubble of kids over the last few years where we've had some bigger classes. They're on their way out. What's coming behind are not the number that we're really necessarily targeting. We're looking at reasonings of what are the reasons why. One of those is potentially number of school choice kids moving. The pandemic had people doing homeschooling. However, a bigger factor there, and Mark and I are going to be doing more digging and then get that information to the board and the community, but there's less kids in the city of North Muskegon than there used to be, even as of 5 years ago. That's a trend, and you can see the trend of school-age kids living in our boundaries is going down. So that's a factor as well. So a lot of different variables there, but we'll see what happens with the school choice windows open, and we'll see what happens with that. And we may have to make some decisions. Earlier I talked about making staffing decisions based on the needs of the students. Well, this would be one of those, where what do our numbers support? But we hope those numbers are going to go up a little bit there in the elementary. This really says the same thing, shows the middle school, high school is pretty much at that target we're after, and elementary, as of right now, isn't. The DK through second, the early childhood area, that's kind of the number we want, and then creep it up to a little bit more in the upper L. I'm going to do a handoff first to Mr. Allen, and then he's going to do a handoff to Ms. Messbergen. Mr. Messbergen. I forgot to thank them at the beginning. The whole administrative team helped put this together, but these two definitely were my right-hand peeps. So I appreciate it, and as long as Mr. Allen is feeling okay from being pinned to the wall with duct tape, if you haven't seen the video, please look at it. I think it's all over Facebook right now. Pretty cool stuff. So the floor is yours as long as you're ready.
Yeah.
No tape burns or anything?
No. And if you did watch it, we kept it suspenseful. So this is a graph that the board has seen before, and so have our school improvement team teachers, and also I think the whole staff has seen these before. But it's been updated to include our NWEA map data for grades K through 7, which would include now October, and then the end of January, start of February were our testing windows. So each color is a different graduating class or cohort, and then it's their average score. And then that black line is the national average pre-COVID that was averaged over either an 8 or 10 year period. They have two different norms. I can't remember which one I used, but that's the national average pre-COVID. So you guys have heard me say this before, but I feel like we're doing pretty well. Like, if you didn't know there was a pandemic, I don't think this graph would suggest to anyone that there was a pandemic, at least in terms of academic outcomes. So this is the math graph. Math is still, math and ELA are more challenging area to help all students be as successful and have learning outcomes we want, but it's still pretty good. Okay, wrong way. Here's the same graph, but for their reading scores. Everything's the same except it's a different subject. And we score a little bit more favorably on average. That's good wait time, yeah? You guys can tell me to come back if you want. I'm getting my buttons mixed up. So there's a lot to look at right here. This is actually a table that's on our website as required by federal law during last year's, in the heat of the pandemic, and now it's somewhat cooling off. And they were ambiguous about what they expected exactly. So we as a district chose the 33rd percentile nationally pre-COVID as our cutoff to say this is a kid who's somewhere in the ballpark of not behind. So if you're 32nd percentile or below pre-COVID average, we said you're behind. And if you're 33rd or above, we said you're not behind. And that was an in-district decision. And why we didn't pick 35th or 30th? Because we didn't. And so this is what percentage of kids in all these different federally mandated subgroups that met that cutoff at different times. So laser pointer doesn't work on the digital screen.
Sorry.
Ain't cats that are watching, I want to apologize. So you can see in May when we ended last year's, the end of last school year, our goal was 70% of our kids would not be behind. We didn't quite make that goal overall for math or reading. And then in October we had 6-ish weeks with the kids. We're in a similar spot where we left off as we're trying to kind of offset summer slide, get to know kids, set up procedures, routines, get to know them. But then between October and February, you can see that around 10% of our students that were behind were no longer behind. So they made it over that 33rd percentile threshold. And so our goal for the end of the year, this next month, when we test a third time, was the 75th or 75% of our kids aren't behind. If you look at the overall, we're already at 77% of kids aren't behind in reading, and 76, actually almost 77% aren't behind in math. So to me, this is really, really encouraging, and I'm really, hopefully for good reason, really optimistic about what we're going to look like when we crunch all these numbers at the end of May from May's testing. And if you look at the different subgroups too, one of the subgroups that jumps out historically would be those with an IEP, the special education subgroup, which for various reasons struggled more than the general ed population with the COVID protocols, which makes sense, but is not acceptable or fortunate. But you can see that group is also making those similar gains, if not greater, now that we've had a little bit more chance to help them out. So everyone, all ships are rising. Not the best analogy, but I got nothing to do with tape right here. Okay, this looks familiar because I made these graphs and I'm not the most original guy all the time. This one is PSAT and SAT data. So the students start taking that in 8th grade and it goes through 11th grade. And math, as you already know, is an area that we keep struggling in. Although 2 years ago would be our class of 2021 is the green line. That looks relatively favorable. Our current juniors are the yellow line, so we'll see what happens. Sometimes juniors between October and then April when they take the SAT make quite a big jump. You can see the slope often increases a lot that junior year. Whether it's for motivation, learning, or a combination, we're not sure. So we'll have to see how they do. But they actually also, am I going the right way? They're also yellow in there, but they're doing a lot more middle of the road. They're actually behind other lines, it looks like, further ELA portion of the SAT. So we'll see how that goes. But these are all updates. At some point I should probably get rid of like the class of 2017, but at least they're data off the graph. And now I'm entering, did you guys have any questions or comments before I start Paul's part? Okay. Yes. It's made of duct tape? I don't know. Thin material tonight. So, in terms of technology, we're going to just continue on with our one-to-one model with Chromebooks so that all students have the opportunity to use Brightspace, Seesaw, Google Classroom, and a wide variety of other digital and online tools that they can use in class, at home, and at school. And then what's coming up, you've already heard classroom wiring is being replaced. Every teacher is going to get a new PC, which is going to also have an updated document camera. I got one of the pilot demo ones, and it's a lot better. You can also use it a lot more easily as a webcam, too. And then the LED fixtures in the Flex are being updated, but you guys need that, too. Maybe not in the audience, but now you do. Also, the technology millage is going to expire after the 23-24 school year, so we have a couple school years left. So that's something to keep in mind. Also, we're always looking for new ways to use technology to help teachers and kids learn more efficiently and maybe with more depth. So in the case that that occurs, we're going to be making sure there's professional development so that teachers know how to do that. And our school app is now available to Android phone users like now, which was news to me today. And Apple is a little bit more stringent in their vetting process, but it should be any second now, Paul assures me, from, I would imagine, his couch. That's not my slide. Okay. If you want, I hope you have colorful graphs.
I told John I had to have colorful graphs because Kurt and John both had them too. So I do apologize. I don't have jokes like John. I just have charts. So as you guys approved back in, I believe, February, the far right is the amendment that you guys approved. As you can see at the bottom, we're going to run about $160,000 deficit. I take you to the left side. We originally thought we were going to run a surplus of a little bit less than $5,000. If you remember, the main reason for that big difference was we assumed enrollment was going to be a lot higher than what it actually came in. We assumed a little bit over 1,000. We finished at about 965 kids. So, and then the far part is that our fund balance is going to maintain around 10.7%. In June, I will have an updated final amendment. Hopefully that is going to get a little bit better, but time will tell. The big thing is as I said in February, unlike normal years where districts, you want to kind of maintain that fund balance or slowly grow it. With COVID and all the federal and state grants that we have, we're going to be kind of on a little roller coaster for a little bit because we got all this one-time money. We have to figure out how do we appropriately use it, because in the next couple of slides you can see where some districts may run into a little bit of an issue in 2025. So talking with Kurt and John, kind of looking at enrollment projections for the next couple of years. Again, this is kind of where our best thought is as of right now. So these on the bottom, these are years in terms of fall. So fall of 22 is next school year, right? So the red dots are the projections. So we started with 965, and as one of Kurt's slides, we have a lot of high 10, 11, and 12th grades, and we have low kindergartners coming in, right? So obviously, with that, you're going to lose kids just right off, just through attrition, and we're not going to do anything. Like, there's nothing North Muskegon can do when you lose 90 kids and you bring in 50. I mean, you just got to take you to school choice. So that's where we're going to drop a little bit again, assuming that. We're going to assume at 955, 950, 955, and then 965. So part of, as Kurt kind of alluded, and he had a slide, I took school choice numbers all the way back from 2013, because the one thing that, since I've been here, since I actually been here right when COVID started, actually, so I only know North Muskegon via COVID. With all of the strenuous stuff that you guys have done, how does that impact our enrollment, right? Has COVID impacted North Muskegon's enrollment? And with enrollment being roughly 40% school choice, let's look at that. So the orange line is the losses. So those are the kids that live inside our district that go somewhere else, that are reported to someone else. So this could be as simple as they go to the Wesley from the MAISD Special Ed Center. Wesley reports them. Even though they live in our district, we bus them over there, all that stuff. The IC reports them, so that's actually a loss for North Muskegon. The gains are obviously kids that come inside the district. So our losses, right, so if North Muskegon was going to be impacted via COVID, the losses have maintained roughly the same number. So that, in my opinion, it's not because our enrollment dipped, because people from North Muskegon that lives inside our boundaries are going somewhere else, okay? It's right there. So if you see in 2020, we took 407 FTEs from districts around us, and now we're down to 386, right? So that's a decrease of 20. Again, I want you guys to be aware these numbers, you can take them at face value. So I use this example. If I'm a kid that goes to Puffer, and my parents moved inside to North Muskegon's district and after a year, that number in 2020 was when I lived in Puffer, went to North Muskegon, I'd be a gain. I'd be one of the 407. And then if I moved inside to North Muskegon's boundary, I'm no longer on this sheet because I'm not a school choice kid, right? So a dip could be because people moved inside our boundaries. So I just wanted, no different a loss. A loss could be something different. So the other factor is, as Kurt alluded, is what is our resident population looking like, and is that a indicator of what we are going to see in the past? So Years again are our fiscal years this time, but gains and losses are the same as this sheet right here. The difference is you can extrapolate this data with our account information that Chrissy does and kind of figure out how many kids that are K-12 that live inside our boundaries. Okay, so you take the gains out of our account, add the losses FTE-wise. So I did that for all of that stuff. And then on the far right is for the kids that live inside North Muskegon's boundaries, what percentage do we educate at North Muskegon Public Schools? Okay, so again, I'm trying to find data that shows was there a drop, was there a dip, and what is the factor. So as you can see in that resident column, it is interesting that in 2020, we had 722 kids that were in our boundaries. This year it's 660. So that's a loss of 60 kids, which ironically is roughly about our loss that we experienced this year. And if we educate, so that's 60, and we educate 88, 87%, that's roughly 54 FTEs that North Muskegon lost in those 2 years. So, but if I think about this, I didn't lose them to school choice, right? They didn't leave North Muskegon for another district. So like what I was explaining this to Kurt, if I had to guess, I would assume that they left, that they moved out. They moved to a different community, they moved outside the county, they moved somewhere else not to come back. And what are those factors like that? So understanding that Muskegon County's births are still declining every year, that I could see this number slowly creeping down, right? So if you extrapolate, we normally are running 88, 89, 87%. If there's another 20 kids less next year, that we would just be inherently losing 15 kids, right? So then it comes back to school choice, where to make up those losses because of just our population as the community decreasing, we have to take either more kids via school choice, these gains, right? Or we have to start right sizing. Oh, I'm going the wrong way now. So what Kurt and I and John looked at was on the revenue side again, because most of it's all revenue. So for fiscal year 2023, foundation would go to $9,050. That's a $350 increase. That's roughly what the governor proposed back in February, with our enrollment estimated at $950. That's an additional $209,000 of state revenue compared to 2022. Similar thing in 24 and 25, it's a $200 per kid increase with our enrollment at $955 and $965 respectively. There's a $223,000 increase from 23 and $282,000 from 25, or from 24 to 25. So that chart, the green is the revenue that we just showed. That's our foundation. That is our total revenue for the general fund with a bunch of estimates, right? So the green is, if you see in 24, we ballooned way up to almost 11.55 million, and then we drop back down. So part of that is because the federal revenue, the federal grants that we get for COVID are gone, right? So now that revenue drops back, but as you can see, expenses historically just compound over and over and over again. So that's where what many districts, including North Muskegon, we are using one-time dollars to fund non-one-time expenses. So at some point, when the grant runs out, which is in 24, 25 becomes the big, there's a gap between the green and the red, or the green and the blue. So that's where, and then that orange line down is the fund balance, and you see the percentage on the right. So if all of this is exactly what happens, I'm not saying that it is, but that's our best guess, we're going to be a little bit above 9% by the end of 2025. After this, I'll call it a roller coaster in quotes for this fund balance. So that's where the team, with some of this federal and state grants that we have received, some of this is not included in there because it's not allocated. We still have it unallocated. The intent is either we got to slowly start to right size, because we do have great years in 23 and 24. We're going to maintain that, right? We're going to maintain our fund balance. We're going to maintain. We have plenty of time to address that, I call it a cliff, but that gap between the revenues and expenses. either we can start looking at increasing our fund balance a little bit higher by utilizing those federal and state grants to bump up our foundation or bump up our fund balance, so then we know in 24 or 25 we're going to slowly drop that back down above and still maintain the fund balance above 10%. So there's a lot of looking forward, but there's also we know we're going to be fine for 23 and 24 with these assumptions. Do you have any questions about my lovely charts? Hopefully John did those charts look good?
I approve.
Thank you. I appreciate. I think that's actually my last one. Yep. No questions? Scot-free.
Thank you, John and Mark. I appreciate it. These guys are characters to work with every day, as you probably can pick up on, and I know you already have picked up on that. They keep it fun. So thank you. Appreciate it. Want to talk a little bit more about the partnerships, and like I said, that word potential could come off there now. The business services, we're already involved with Fruitport Schools. It's going great. You just heard from Mark, and Jess is in the audience here today too as well. So that has gone very, very well. We talk about school consolidation. You hear it in the media and other places, and normally what people are talking about there is taking a couple of schools and smushing them together and become one. I'm a firm believer that there's other ways to consolidate schools and still have some win-wins, and that's through partnerships that make sense for everyone involved. That's what we're looking at doing. I don't think many school districts in the state of Michigan want to lose their identity. I think they want to look at being fiscally responsible and keeping their doors open, and that's what I believe we want. So I believe these partnerships will help do that. In the board meeting, we talked about our transportation supervision partnership with Whitehall Food Service, with Montague, and then combining our maintenance departments with the city of North Muskegon and North Muskegon Public Schools. If anyone has any questions on those, I think it'd be a great spot to throw into the link on the webpage, and we'll do our best to keep the community understanding where we're heading with that. So really excited about these. The last thing I'm going to say is one more positive thank you to Michelle and Jim. These are two people that have dedicated a lot of years to North Muskegon Public Schools. They've become and are all of our friends, and they also do an amazing job for us. So we're not replacing them. We're wishing them well, and we're moving on to the best of our ability. So I'm going to miss them both, and I know a whole bunch of other people are. Oops, that's went away. Sorry. I've had people ask about an update on the recreation facility, so it's great that Mr. Jansen's here too. But first want to thank Sam and the North Muskegon City Council for taking us along with this ride. Will, Steve, I think you guys can remember 5 or so years ago these communications and meetings starting to happen. And we're in a whole different place now, and it's pretty exciting. But we have a good thing going in North Muskegon with our partnership with the city and the school working together. This is just going to be another example of it. Happy to say that as soon as the snow is out of the way here next spring, we're going to start to see some things moving. That's already in place. We're just waiting for that timeline to happen. That will impact the diamond sports, so the baseball and softball complex, as well as where the existing baseball field is right now, being turned into a multi-use area, as well as competition soccer. The tennis courts, still in the works. We continue to talk with our contacts in Lansing. Very confident that that's going to happen. Very confident that we're going to get funding from the state level to help us with that. It's not in place right now, but all things are pointing in that direction. So just good stuff, and hats off to our city council. And thank you, Sam, for engaging with us right from the get-go. When it's all said and done, total game changer for the city of North Muskegon with these facilities. Total game changer. So if you want the most up-to-date information, the city, Sam and his staff, you go to their webpage under residents, the drop down to build to play. This is where all of the updates go, and people can keep up on that as things are happening. So now, fun stuff. Get to look at where we're heading with some things. You just got a lot of information, and I want to touch on some main bullet points that I think fit in with what you've heard already and where we're going, and then a couple other just add-ons. Summer learning program. It was a huge hit last year. Had a lot of kids involved. Had many parents hoping that that was going to continue. Being fiscally responsible, we have dollars that were allocated by our state to us for summer programming last year that will fully fund summer program this year. Not every district in the state can say that. We did a great job with that, and because of that, our kids are going to reap the benefit of that. It's going to be open to everybody. Information is going to go out this week, and anyone can sign up. However, our staff, just like we did last year, is going to target kids that they really believe could benefit from being involved in a summer learning program. It's going to be hands-on again, but we're not under necessarily as many restraints from the state, so we're going to Norsemanize it, tweak it a little bit that we think are going to be good things for kids, and also for our staff that are going to be helping us out. Our commitment to TCIS, Therapeutic Crisis Intervention for Schools, we're all in. You're going to hear a lot more about TCIS. We're going to continue to look for ways to beef up the training and practices with our staff. We're already seeing wins from this. You bring kids back from not really being in school for a couple of years. There's going to be some behavior things. TCIS has helped us this year, I think, tighten that little curve that we would have been on. Without it, I think we'd be in a different place. So same thing with positive behavior supports, rejuvenating that program. It never went away, but we're rejuvenating, bringing it back. And then hats off and a plug for our clinicians on mindfulness and every other aspect when it comes to the mental well-being of our kids. When I say clinicians, our counselors, social workers, and school psychologists. New position for us. Hi, Molly, if you're watching. The mindfulness lessons each week this year have been amazing. I know the board has gotten those, and they're available to parents as well. But our staff are using those, and we're just going to get better with that. We actually are to the point now where we're piloting a mindfulness program that does exactly what our staff was doing, developing little lessons that the staff can just hit play and facilitate. We're looking at potentially purchasing something like that and getting in on the front end of it, so cost-wise it's going to be really a good deal for us. That would allow our clinicians the ability to be in classes more when these things are being shown and be more of the facilitator versus having to develop all of these for us. They'd be developed somewhere else, and then we would implement them. So I'm excited for that. We're going to continue as a school district to make decisions that are fiscally responsible with the needs of our kids in the forefront. We always have, we always will. And as Mark touched on, we are going to have some things to talk about coming up. If some of the trends continue, we're going to, like he said, we're going to be okay for a couple of years because of one-time dollars. But when those go away, we're going to need to be prepared for what that means. We can use these next 2 years, I believe, to set us up so that really we don't even see a impact from it as long as we make some decisions. So we'll be bringing more information to the board and the community on that. And then we're going to continue to work together in North Muskegon. I started out this slideshow or this presentation thanking the community for supporting us. We showed how amazing North Muskegon is once again through some pretty crazy times. Many communities were having all kinds of problems at board meetings and parents showing up and picketing and community members and people being at odds. We didn't always see eye to eye, but we worked together professionally, collegially, and with a caring attitude and respect it was enviable. We were able to watch the crazy stuff on TV. It wasn't happening here. Did we have meetings with different parents with different ideas and groups with different ideas? And yeah, we did. We talked through them, and that helped make decisions. And people were respectful. So we're going to continue that. I think we learned, once again, how amazing North Muskegon is through this crazy pandemic. This is a sentence our staff came up with several years ago, and it couldn't ring any more true than it does right now. We're an educational community that gives our best and expects the best. I'm just going to end my part, and then the board, I'm going to kind of do this to you, and you can say it, your words as we move down, but I'm going to end my part with, it's a great day to be Norseman, and I truly believe that every day is a great day to be Norseman. Thank you. And then now, from the words and the mouths of our Board of Education, the state of North Muskegon Public Schools is
Traditions.
Outstanding.
Student-focused.
Inclusive. Tenacious.
Forward thinking.
Thank you, Board. And thanks for those that are viewing and or watching this on record. We can take questions if there are any from anyone in the room, but then there's also, please remember, there's a link on the webpage to take questions so that we can make sure everybody has the same information. So, thank you, Norseman.